Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto discussion video. In this one I'm going to be speculating about the upcoming chapter, chapter 76, which is coming out on December 20th. And we'll also be talking a little bit more about the chapter that we got in November, chapter 75. Very, very notable chapter of the series. Now, usually I don't tend to do these discussion videos until probably like a week before the new chapter, but this is what being excited about the manga sort of does. When there's a chapter that's really interesting that I want to discuss, it makes me want to discuss it sort of as soon as possible. So I've waited here until kind of roughly sort of like the halfway point, I suppose, in the middle of chapters to do this. Chapter 75, like extra discussion and also speculation ahead of the next chapter. And that's the big thing. I think in general, I saw pretty much nothing but, a lot of hype, a lot of praise for chapter 75. And I think people are excited to see what comes next. That was a volume ending chapter, so we're going into a volume beginning chapter here. But we're in an interesting spot where it feels like you can't exactly just go back to the way things were. It still feels like there's more of the explanation that we need to get. They still have the code stuff to kind of happen at some point. So it does feel like we're probably going to get another two chapters of like further explanation, clarification on a few things. Because of course, chapter 75 was big, impactful, and there was a lot that was discussed, but there's still a lot more that needs to happen. So let's kind of recap the previous chapter. So the big reveal throughout the whole chapter was the reveal of Shibai Otsutsuki, the Otsutsuki god. So that's what I have here. The first and so far only Otsutsuki to accomplish the clan goal of achieving godhood. This seems to be the thing that all the big Otsutsuki actually want to accomplish. And they accomplish this, of course, by eating as many chakra fruits as possible. And after a certain amount of them, quality of them, I guess, you do achieve godhood. Now it's interesting that the amount of stuff that does need to happen for this to actually occur, in that this means you need multiple 10 tails, because every chakra fruit comes from a divine tree, and that divine tree needs a 10 tails as the core seed, and then a powerful Otsutsuki sacrifice to sort of fuel that seed to grow into the tree. And that will eventually give you your chakra fruit. So Shibai must have done this like 10 plus 20, who knows how many they're actually saying, kind of countless or whatever is the wording of it. So a lot of just logistics in a way required to achieve this level of skill, ability. And the other big reveal here is the idea of shinjutsu. So achieving this god level gives access to, I guess, all of the shinjutsu or something like that. This is where we get into a little bit of a kind of technical thing on shinjutsu, which is basically translated as divine techniques. So we get the reveal that he did eventually leave his body behind as he left for another dimension, ascended to becoming like a true god. Whatever way you want to establish this, it seems like he accomplished whatever it was he wanted to. And so his body now exists as this sort of physical source of these shinjutsu abilities that Amado, at the very least, has been able to use and give to people who aren't Otsutsuki, but we don't know the full details on this. So obviously, from the origin story that we got here, shinjutsu abilities do exist pre-Shibai achieving godhood, because Amado explains that on the path to accomplish this, he used karma resurrection multiple times to, I suppose, cheat death, expand his lifespan to get to the point where he could do enough to become a god. So he does explain later that karma is itself a shinjutsu. So before he became a god, he at the very least had one shinjutsu ability, and the implication sort of seems to be that, okay, just by eating a lot of chakra fruits, you will gradually develop a couple of shinjutsu, but if you do achieve godhood, you have them all, I guess. This is where it's maybe not the most kind of clear thing, but because the chakra fruit thing is such a complicated process, I think it makes sense that that's how you get yourself at least one, godlike ability. So this likely means that other Otsutsuki develop specific shinjutsu as they power up from eating chakra fruits themselves. Now, we don't have that many examples of like a chakra fruit directly being eaten on screen. Like we have the Kaguya origin story from the anime where we directly see her eat it and sort of power up, and that's what seems to be the thing that unlocks her sort of like Rinnegan in the center of her forehead. So they seem to sort of be establishing that, I guess, that the Otsutsuki Rinnegan is a shinjutsu to a certain degree, and that I guess the Rinnegan / Sharingan, Kekkei Genkai is in a way one of the closest abilities that humans have that borders on being a shinjutsu. Then we have this one. It's unclear if the only implanted shinjutsu are the ones Amado has done, or if certain Otsutsuki have their abilities because of Shibai's body. Isshiki is probably the best example that is directly given, where I think Amado directly says Ishiki's abilities are shinjutsu, the whole shrinking ability and so on. So did Isshiki get his ability, like I say here? So when he was born, became a member of the Otsutsuki clan, did he just have this inherently, that ability to shrink? Did he develop it or get it over time from eating chakra fruits, trying to become an Otsutsuki god? Or did he consume part of Shibai's body or something like that, and that's how he got that ability? That's what I would like to know. That's probably one of the main clarifications I'd like on how exactly this all works. I'm guessing it will be a thing where they just mean by that when you do become a god, you have all of the abilities, but that you slowly develop at least a couple of them as you begin to sort of power up by eating more and more chakra fruits. This might help to explain the thing with Momoshiki, where, as far as we're aware, he has eaten at least a couple of chakra fruits before. That might help to explain why he has sort of a Byakugan and Rinnegan stuff in his hands and a couple of other abilities. It's just the exact breakdown of sort of what is inherently just Otsutsuki are like this and what comes from other places. So the implication has to be that Isshiki had access to Shibai's body, or at least part of it. This is the only way to explain how Amado could implant abilities into the likes of Code, Ada, and Demon. And this makes sense, of course, because he directly says that at least one of Ada's abilities and Demon's ability are shinjutsu, and that he got them by implanting this from Shibai. So that means logically that he only gained access to this because of the connection with Isshiki, and then Isshiki is the only one who in a way makes sense to in any way have access to Shibai's body. Now, again, I would love to know what the exact details of that are, in that did he have a couple of cells, or did Isshiki have his body somewhere, or a hand, an arm, something like that? What are we talking about here in terms of the amount of the body that was kind of used here? And then what does that suggest about the way Shibai's body is considered, I suppose, in the culture of Otsutsuki? I assume the main family, which we know exists, there's a main and a branch family. The main family probably keeps close eye on it, but then how does that explain how Isshiki gave some of it to Amado to make these abilities happen? And just the details of this, because we know that at a certain point Isshiki was no, shut these two down and basically sealed them away, they're too powerful. Because basically the idea is that they are more powerful than Isshiki was in that initial Jigen form when this was all kind of made in the first place. So what's the idea about this here? Was there a deeper plan to what was actually kind of happening here? Obviously, I think the idea was probably that Isshiki wanted I guess, Kawaki to be his ultimate vessel. And then because Kawaki was like an Otsutsuki vessel, augmented by like ninja tech and like modern stuff, that maybe that was then a body that he could then implant all of these crazy abilities onto. And Ada and Demon are just sort of like test subjects of at least a couple of those abilities. And the idea theoretically was that maybe Isshiki wanted to quickly gain a couple of extra abilities somehow. It's interesting to maybe speculate about that. But anyway, this then brings up, getting deeper into the origin story of the Otsutsuki. We know they're parasites. That was a really interesting chapter when that was revealed to us. But them as a species, because we know they're basically aliens. They come from like another planet, basically, another dimension, whatever way you want to consider it. They are, I suppose, that pure white skinned with kind of horns. Did they have power in the first place, or do all of their powers come from chakra fruits? Which then goes into the idea of the tentails, which I think is something that I think will need to be explored more as we go forward, because these are the seeds for the divine trees. We've been told that already. But the obvious question is, where do they get that many tentails from? Because I don't think we've ever got the idea of, like, can you reuse a tentails or whatever, and that whole detail. Theoretically, I suppose you can, maybe. But the idea is that there are at least multiple of these out there, even if there's not maybe one every time a chakra fruit gets eaten. Actually, I'm not really sure, because do we even know enough details to fully say that for sure? But either way, there is either a lot or a decent amount of tentails. So where do they get them from is obviously the idea, because the tentails that we originally knew about, that was a key to the end plot of like Naruto Shippuden, is the origin of, like, the tailed beast, the 9-tailed beast. So it's crazy to even think that there's another one, let alone like tens of them, or who knows how many there are. So, they're chakra monsters. Even the tentails at its core is a chakra monster. So if you were to say there's an origin for like all abilities and techniques in Naruto, I guess that means it fundamentally comes from the tentails, because the way, I suppose, to effectively transfer that ability into a person is through planting a tentails, feeding it a person, and then eating the fruit that comes out, and that's how you gain more power. So the core origin, you would have to say, comes from, tentails, I suppose. And then gradually the people that you sort of fuel it with get more powerful over time. But the core seems to be the tentails at the heart of all of this. The true source of power in the world of Naruto. So yeah, technically this could make the tentails the true source of power, since you need tentails to get chakra fruits. But how did the first Otsutsuki who used them control them? Like, this is just a species that comes from a planet. When did they start their sort of like conquest, effectively, realizing that we can gain power by using the tentails and going to other planets and, planting them and so on? How did that all come about in the first place? So that maybe suggests that they had some inherent power to them. Is the tentails an animal from whatever planet the Otsutsuki come from, or what? This is where there probably does need to be a deeper origin story at some point to explain more of these things, definitely. Because obviously we know, like, Code's plan at the moment is going to involve the tentails. He wants to ultimately feed Boruto or Kawaki to that tentails to get a chakra fruit, and in his case, according to Isshiki, he will become an Otsutsuki if he eats the chakra fruit. So that's what he wants to achieve, which suggests something kind of interesting in that Code's karma mark is a white one, because it's literally just the power, and it's like missing certain aspects of being an Otsutsuki, and that's why you wouldn't say Code is Otsutsukified, but apparently he can become like that just by eating the chakra fruit. Now, obviously the idea there is that the chakra fruit planted on Earth would be powered by, of course, whatever humans are absorbed into it, which have powers, but the Otsutsuki aspect would come from either Boruto or Kawaki, and that's, I suppose, how you could say the genetic aspect becomes part of code. So there is a logic to it, but it's hard to piece it all together. But I just love how interesting this is, because I do feel that, like, once we do the whole Kawaki stuff and maybe deal with that, I do still feel and maintain that our end game for Boruto is dealing with the Otsutsuki, the heads of the clan, and who knows, maybe even where the spirit or soul of Shibai is as a god, or whatever's going on there. What exactly happened to him? It feels like he's been referenced here for a reason, that either him or whoever is the current head of the Otsutsuki clan, whoever is the current, I guess, closest to achieving godhood once more, that will be our endgame kind of character in all of this. And that's, I think, very, very interesting to consider. Next, we have, of course, Amado was speaking. He finally, after all this time, spoke in the previous chapter, but he didn't reveal the full truth. In that, like, Ada can only go back far enough to kind of clarify certain parts of his story, and then there are other parts of it that she doesn't actually know about completely. So we do get the answer to the whole Amado's daughter situation. Delta is the partial answer to who his daughter is. Delta is basically a failed attempt to implant his actual daughter's name, Akebi, her memories, into a cloned body after Akebi basically died of a sudden kind of aggressive illness. And basically, Amado from this figures out that without basically an ability that comes from a god, he can't do something that is effectively in the realm of gods, and that is sort of reviving effectively someone who has died. He can't just scientifically, with code and stuff like that, do it in the very logical way that he wanted to. He needs to do that same approach, but it be done via like a divine method, which is karma, and we'll get to that in just a second. So without the divine ability, he will never get a clone that is exactly his daughter. That's why Delta is just this other person who just happens to look like his daughter. So we do find out he was already a skilled scientist before he encountered Kara and Isshiki. And we get, again, the idea they have advanced tech because, I guess, of Isshiki and so on. And because of this, he has further advanced. And interestingly, he has seemingly created something that resembles a shinjutsu. That's really interesting. Just on its own. And then because he lied about this is the one thing Momoshiki confirms he has lied about. Why isn't he saying that, oh, and this other ability that she has is not one of these things, I made it, or whatever? Because that's the implication, is that she has that ability and it comes from Amado, but it's not, I suppose, what he was asked to do. So why is it there? Why does Ada have this? What's going on? And we'll get to that as we go forward. So, next, Kawaki and Akebi's memory. So, the aspect in all of this that's, I suppose, most interesting is that the explanation for Amado's, like, chapters upon chapters of being suspicious surrounding Kawaki and needing to talk to him comes down to this, in that he reveals that with the return of Kawaki's karma mark, which, of course, Amado basically engineered the situation where it would come back, Kawaki has Akebi's memories inside the karma mark also. So he's planning, his scheme is for Kawaki to implant Akebi's memories via a karma mark into a new cloned body. This should bring back Akebi since it's using a shinjutsu, a divine ability. And that makes sense to a certain degree, but it also feels like there has to be a twist, because if it works as perfectly as just directly explained, then that's pretty kind of crazy that you can literally just download someone's memories in the world of Naruto, and then if someone has a karma mark, you can just clone their body and bring them back that way. And that's just an inherent thing you can do, full stop. So it does feel like there probably has to be, and likely is, a twist in all of this. That, if there's no risk to Kawaki, then there's no problem, but there probably has to be one. So, What about, to bring back Akebi, would it sacrifice Kawaki? This could be what leads Kawaki down a darker path to get us to the chapter 1 flash forward. Like, what if Amado, who has shown some sense of concern for Kawaki in a bunch of the previous chapters, what if he is also just basically viewing Kawaki as effectively this vessel that can contain the power that is needed to revive his daughter, and that he doesn't actually care about Kawaki as a person and what happens to him, however this might happen. All he cares about is that that ability is there in place to help his daughter. Now, this is where you get into the technical things of, like, the karma as we know it is, let's just say there is a cloned body and Kawaki just does a normal karma mark, not including Akebi's memories. The idea would be that if Kawaki died, he would just resurrect in that cloned body, assuming that body is, like, healthy and functional. That's how karma actually works normally. That's the intent of it anyway. The fact that it's a clone and there's no actual, like, soul, I suppose, in there in the first place, there are no memories in there in the first place, is slightly different than the usual situation, I guess, which is that, like, you implant it in someone and then you basically overtake their entire being effectively. So there's that, which I think is just interesting by itself. But now you add in the idea that, okay, so the karma that Kawaki is implanting is it only Akebi? Or does for Kawaki to implant a karma in someone, does it have to also include, like, his own, like, DNA makeup, his own kind of, like, seed of who he is that will eventually extract to allow a Kawaki resurrection? That's what I'm kind of very interested in that, like, how does Kawaki make that distinction when he's putting that into the clone, that it's only Akebi and not him? And this is where I maybe feel like the twist is that, what if it is both, and Amado's plan is for basically, and then we kill Kawaki once the karma mark is implanted and fully extracted, but Kawaki disappears and Akebi is the one that resurrects, because this is a karma mark that actually has two groups of, like, memories of, like, fundamentally who the person is. One of them has to win, I suppose. So I'm wondering if that's the twist, basically. That would be quite clever, but we'll see what happens. Next, Ada's charm ability is different. So, yeah, it's noted that her Senrigan is a shinjutsu, but Momoshiki says that despite his strong knowledge of all shinjutsu, he knows of none that resemble Ada's ability to charm nearly everyone that she meets. This is one of Amado's lies that he said, and why? Why specifically this? What's the idea about this? Is it powerful enough? Well, in my mind, it is powerful enough to be classified on the level of a shinjutsu, just with how incredibly powerful it is. It's just an ability to basically, like, stop anyone in their tracks. Like, no one can harm you if they're in love with you in the way that this ability works. So, has Amado made an ability on that level, or was it some sort of a test that's maybe gone wrong? Because obviously the other abilities is just straight up an ability that Shibai had in his body that Amado has just grafted onto someone else. But this has to be some sort of a manufactured ability in some way, because Momoshiki is saying that it's not a shinjutsu. So the charm ability is mind control to some extent. So was the intent of this to figure out how to just full-on mind control someone in that way? But we do have the mind transfer jutsu, but is this just like a kind of omnipresent one of just anyone around her just falls for her? Is that what it was trying to do? Is the purpose literally to make people fall in love or care about people? And then, is the reason Amado's developing this ability is that he wants his new daughter, basically, when she comes back, to have this, to protect her in some way? Or is it to make his daughter love him? That would maybe suggest that there's issues between the two. And what if his daughter doesn't care for him anymore? So this is the way to guarantee that happens. That would be kind of interesting, but I don't really know. There's nothing that just inherently comes to mind about why he would randomly add in this extra ability, and especially given like the limitations that it has, that like it doesn't work on Otsutsukis, so it's not something that he was developing, I guess, to or maybe it was, maybe that's the failure of it, is that he was maybe doing it to try and control Isshiki and other Otsutsuki, but it just doesn't work that way. And then I'm completely wrong about the whole idea if it was intended for his daughter, because it also doesn't work on blood relations either. So that makes me kind of feel like, wait, what's the idea of this fundamentally? In that, like, if it's just some illness that she came down with, I'm not sure that would directly make him be like, I want to give her an ability that would just protect her from all other people. In the way that this is, it would feel like he would make her sort of like immune to illnesses if that's something he was trying to accomplish. So I don't know. I find that one just to be a very like interesting, like, where are they going with that? Because I don't think we maybe expected that to be anything like that. But anyway, then we have the vision of the future from the end of chapter 75. Obviously, one thing that's been discussed a little bit is Byakugan or Jogan. Now, in my mind, what we were shown here, it's very likely, I think it's all but confirmed, this was Momo's Byakugan, which we know can see other people's fate. I would not rule out the Jogan ever making an appearance. I think I got a couple of comments on my video when I reviewed the chapter and mentioned the Jogan, people saying that, like, the Jogan only exists in the anime, it's never going to make an appearance in the manga, you know, that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of people very quick to dismiss the Jogan as being a plot point that means anything. Now, who knows, but if you have watched every episode of the anime, you'll know the Jogan has made scattered appearances over the course of the series, and it does relate to the Otsutsuki from the anime that we've been told, because Toneri mentions it to Boruto, that it's a significant thing. Momoshiki references that, is it Urashiki or someone like that? Either way, it's mentioned that, like, Boruto has this sort of troublesome eye that the Otsutsuki are aware of, that this is an ability they know about that kind of like opposes them in some way. And because of what I'll get to, I suppose, later on, and talking about the whole idea of, like, Momoshiki always talks about, your blue eyes will take everything away from you. And then Toneri is talking about how your eye will guide, will like change your fate and guide you to like the right path. What exactly are we kind of talking about here? Very interesting. So it seems like either Boruto or Kawaki has done something to make the village come after them, and people close to them feel like they have betrayed them in some way, that like friends aren't meant to do this type thing, and they're a little bit concerned that this has actually happened. Kawaki in general would make the most sense, because we know roughly where his character has to go, and you can see a situation where, oh yeah, Kawaki on the run from everyone else because he's doing something he feels he has to do. That's very obvious and feels like we're getting there eventually. But is the vision from Boruto's perspective, like the way the panels are shown, is it directly Boruto using Momoshiki's Byakugan to see something that happens basically through his own eyes in the future? And that's why we get the shot that looks like he's looking up at Kawaki, directly at like Shikadai, across over to Sarada. Is that it, or are those just the panels to show the general scene of what's in the future? Either way, we know that the time when Boruto's big moment where he will lose everything is coming up soon, and it seems like we're just about to get there. But what is the situation where all this happens? So, other point here, Momo's Byakugan apparently doesn't work on himself. So if it's Boruto using it, can he even see his own future? Or is this like Momoshiki acting through Boruto, so this way sort of like the two of them combined get around that initial restriction of it? I don't really know. But anyway, getting into more speculation about the coming chapter. Code. Not really, apart from a mention of his ability in chapter 75 wasn't really mentioned. So it actually has been quite a few chapters since we saw him about to lead his army out to strike. So when is this going to happen? When is this big interruption going to happen? We know his goal is a chakra fruit, which will apparently make him an Otsutsuki if he eats it. He needs to sacrifice. Only Boruto and Kawaki are valid sacrifices to make this happen. But we know both survive into the future. So does his plan just fail and we don't get even close? Because the whole point of this, that's very, very interesting. Again, I noted very heavily in this video, the 10 tails is really important. So what happens to the 10 tails if Code just like loses and is taken out? The other side of this plan is killing those who help to kill Isshiki. This is something that could theoretically happen. If you want to do something big with Code, have him still ultimately fail in his other goal, but kill someone of note. Might that be something that they build towards? I think everyone has had the death flags up for Sasuke, I think, for quite a while now. Obviously, we know Naruto is just sent somewhere by Kawaki at some point. We'll see how exactly that comes about. But what about Sasuke? Because feels like almost he's destined to die helping Boruto, and that be something that drives Boruto onwards as a character. We'll see if they do that or not. So, there's that. And then, just in general, where the chapter ends, they're all still sitting there. We're still in the same scene as the explanation from chapter 75. We're going to have to, I guess, pretty much continue on from here because we more or less kind of ended in midair because we went straight from Ada being like, oh, I can confirm his daughter definitely exists, and then I don't know anything else, to Boruto has his Momoshiki conversation where he finds out Amado is lying. So, you know, there's a lot of questions that do need to come up, and I think we probably do have to have at least some more discussion about what Amado's talking about to clarify some things. So, first of all, will this be brought up? Is there a risk to Kawaki in helping Amado bring back Akebi? This is something that, of course, I guess Kawaki is going to have to bring up if Amado wants to immediately jump into doing this, if he's at all prepared for this. This is something that questions are going to have to be asked about. What is the exact process for this? And what will happen to Kawaki in all of this? Because the idea is like, okay, he implants the karma mark into a cloned body of Akebi. Then what? Does she just come back to life? How does that work? Because the way the karma works is that the body that is alive has to die, and then the extraction, once it's fully complete, activates, and then the person is reborn. So what's the activation for this? Does Kawaki have to die for Akebi to be born? Or because she is already dead, would it just be an automatic thing and it's as simple as that? That's what I'm not sure about. That's going to be interesting. Then, will Boruto announce that he knows Amado is lying about Ada's charm ability? Or will he keep it to himself to avoid having to discuss that he's basically having internal dialogue with Momoshiki, given how suspicious everyone is about that and cautious about it? Interesting. That probably is what will happen, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Because if it comes out that, like, more people are aware that, like, oh yeah, there's some Momoshiki stuff going on with him, and especially if he maybe makes a move following potentially the advice of Momoshiki, but isn't able to in the moment explain why this is the right course of action, that could make Boruto look bad in some way, to the point where the villagers feel like he is the one at fault in all of this. Does Amado still have access to this part of Shibai / what happened to this? Again, this is where I would like to know what exactly was the detail here in terms of, did Isshiki just have full access to the body? Was it part of the body? Was it just cells from Shibai? What is the extent of, like, the Otsutsuki still having this body and so on? How long has it been? How long ago was it when this happened? Etc. There's a lot of questions here. And then, in general, yeah, Momo has taunted Boruto for a while now with the idea that the time when he will lose everything is coming very, very soon. His blue eyes will take everything from him, is the big quote from, like, earlier chapters. Why the focus on the eyes? The Byakugan is white, Boruto's eyes are normally blue, but is that significant in any way? Meaning that the Jogan, which is typically shown as being a kind of light, bright blue, makes probably the most sense. But the Jogan is only in one eye, as far as we're aware, with Boruto. So Momoshiki's talking about both of his eyes. Is he just being symbolic in some way? But why, again, the significance there? Tonieri from the anime also makes note of Boruto's eyes being of note in certain anime episodes as well. So a lot of stuff could happen here in that, like, we're just in a moment where I think the next couple of chapters do have the potential to be just an amazing run of chapters. More continuing on this sort of like lore dump here, which has been really strong so far. And then you can activate the code ability to immediately jump into some heavy action, which does have pretty big stakes attached to it now that we know the tease for the future and something crazy happening to Boruto is about to happen. That might also change Kawaki's trajectory as a character, which might also affect the way Amado is viewed within the village. It might result, potentially in something happening to Sasuke, whatever happens to Naruto happening to Naruto. And that, like, just the idea that we don't know when exactly the time skip is going to happen and what will make it happen, basically. But if Code is attacking now, that is something we do have to deal with here. Now, again, this is where Ada and Demon come into play, because, again, Demon is apparently the most powerful character in the series. Who can counter him? And if he is allied properly with, I suppose, basically whoever Ada chooses who she wants to follow. If Code and Demon face off against each other, it feels like Code just doesn't have a chance. We've seen that already. So what's happening here? Is it going to be something like the army maybe have like an advantage against Demon because they're these weird kind of construct soldiers rather than true kind of living beings that, like, their intentions don't matter and get through his ability? What's the deal there? I'm not really sure. And then, yeah, like, Ada in all of this still is very interesting because her motives are still based on the idea of wanting to form a relationship with Kawaki, but they haven't properly talked yet. And she is central to all of this because if she wants to, I suppose she can just go around and sort of purposefully take advantage of her ability. She tends to stay away from other people. But if she did just walk around, she could gather everyone up to follow her, and very few people could resist it. That's the interesting thing about this, is that Ada is still overall in complete control, and is basically balanced by the fact that her overall motivations are so kind of low-key in the grand scheme of what she's capable of. But anyway, I'm going to end the video there with just the idea that, like, I like being excited about Boruto again. I'm actually really, really excited for Chapter 76 to see what they do. I just feel like we're going into a chapter, and I just feel there's no way the chapter can be anything less than, like, pretty good if they do anything to follow up on the previous chapter. Like, unless they decide to devote the entire chapter to just, like, Code traveling to where he needs to get to, but I don't think they can even do that because he basically has a god ability to transfer with his marks wherever he needs to, so they can't even do that. And once the fight stuff happens and they don't interrupt, I suppose, too important information, I'm invested in what's going on here. So I'm going to wrap it up there. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are heading into the next chapter and some more thoughts on Chapter 75. What do you think is going to happen? And how much do you think the new chapter will cover? And has Chapter 75 sort of like reignited your excitement in the series as much as it has mine? But other than that, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.